In a shocking twist, Letitia James, New York's Attorney General known for pursuing Donald Trump, faces a federal indictment. A grand jury in Virginia charged her with bank fraud and making false statements, serious offenses with severe penalties. The irony is palpable. The prosecutor becomes the prosecuted, raising questions about justice and political retribution. This unprecedented case challenges the integrity of our judicial system and the impartiality of justice. As the nation watches, the unfolding drama will test democratic norms and the narrative of justice in America. Are we witnessing justice or political retaliation? The answer will define this era. To truly grasp the impact of the indictment, we first need to understand the woman at its center, Letitia James. She's not just a name in the headlines, she's a formidable force in New York politics, known for her tenacity, her outspokenness, and her willingness to take on powerful adversaries. Her journey to this moment is as remarkable as the case itself, and it's shaped by decades of public service, advocacy, and a deep commitment to justice. Letitia James began her career as a public defender, fighting for those who couldn't afford legal representation. Her passion for justice propelled her into city politics, where she served on the New York City Council, championing issues like affordable housing, police reform, and government transparency. In 2018, she made history by becoming the first woman of color ever elected to statewide office in New York, taking on the role of Attorney General. Her election was a milestone, not just for her, but for the state and the nation, signaling a new era of leadership and accountability. As Attorney General, James quickly established a reputation for her aggressive legal approach. She didn't shy away from high-profile cases, launching investigations into major corporations, the opioid industry, and the National Rifle Association. Her willingness to challenge powerful interests earned her both praise and criticism. But it was her investigation into former President Donald Trump and his business empire that catapulted her onto the national stage, making her a household name and a lightning rod for controversy. In 2023, James filed a sweeping civil fraud case against Trump, alleging years of financial misconduct. The case was unprecedented in its scope and ambition, and it cemented her reputation as a relentless adversary, someone unafraid to hold even the most powerful figures accountable. The trial drew intense media attention, with James often seen outside the courthouse, calmly addressing reporters and reaffirming her commitment to the rule of law. Public reaction to James has been deeply polarized. To her supporters, she's a hero, an unwavering defender of justice, standing up for ordinary people against the wealthy and well-connected. They see her as a symbol of progress and accountability, someone who refuses to back down in the face of intimidation. But her detractors accuse her of being politically motivated, using her office to settle scores and advance her own career. The debate over her motives has only intensified as the Trump case has unfolded. This backdrop of animosity and division frames her indictment, intertwining complex legal charges with the realities of political warfare. Every move she makes is scrutinized, every statement dissected for hidden meaning. The courtroom has become a battleground, not just for legal arguments, but for the soul of American democracy itself, with James at the center of the storm. As the case unfolds, the stakes could not be higher. The lines between justice and politics blur, and the outcome will reverberate far beyond the walls of the courthouse, shaping the future of accountability, power, and the rule of law in America. The indictment against Letitia James centers on a personal real estate deal, not her official duties. Accused of bank fraud, she allegedly misrepresented a Norfolk, Virginia property as a secondary residence. Prosecutors claim it was intended as a rental, securing her a better loan rate. The alleged financial gain is modest, but the charges carry severe penalties. Federal bank fraud laws are broad, focusing on deception rather than financial loss. If convicted, James faces up to 30 years in prison and hefty fines. The case underscores the gravity of her situation and the stakes involved. The indictment of Letitia James did not occur in a vacuum. It is the culmination of months, if not years, of mounting political pressure and public scrutiny. As New York's Attorney General, James became a central figure in the legal battles surrounding former President Donald Trump, drawing both praise and fierce criticism from across the political spectrum. Her high-profile case against Trump placed her directly in the national spotlight, making her a target for those who saw her actions as politically motivated. After James successfully pursued a civil fraud case that resulted in Trump being found liable, the former president wasted no time in launching a public campaign against her. At rallies and on social media, Trump repeatedly called for James to be investigated and prosecuted, framing her legal actions as part of a broader political witch hunt. His supporters echoed these sentiments, amplifying the pressure on law enforcement and judicial officials to take action against James. When Trump returned to the presidency, the calls for retribution only grew louder. His renewed influence over the Justice Department and federal agencies emboldened allies to push for investigations into James, arguing that her actions warranted criminal charges. The political climate became increasingly charged, with partisan rhetoric dominating the conversation and fueling public distrust in the legal process. Attorney General Pam Bondi, a staunch Trump ally, was urged by administration officials and political operatives to take decisive action. However, the U.S. Attorney in Virginia initially reviewed the evidence and determined there was not enough to proceed with charges against James. This decision was met with frustration from Trump's inner circle, who viewed it as a failure to hold James accountable. In response, the administration replaced the U.S. Attorney with Lindsay Halligan, a lawyer known for her loyalty to Trump and her willingness to pursue politically sensitive cases. Halligan's appointment marked a turning point in the investigation. Under her leadership, the case was reopened, and new efforts were made to build a case against James, despite the earlier lack of evidence. The renewed investigation quickly led to James's indictment, a move that many legal experts and observers saw as the result of political maneuvering rather than an impartial pursuit of justice. The sequence of events, from public calls for prosecution to the replacement of key officials, painted a picture of a justice system under intense political influence. This narrative of political retribution has cast a long shadow over the legal proceedings, raising serious questions about the independence of the judiciary and the integrity of the rule of law. Critics argue that the prosecution of James is less about justice and more about settling political scores, while supporters insist that no one is above the law. The implications for justice and democracy are profound. As the nation watches this case unfold, the outcome will likely shape public trust in the legal system for years to come, highlighting the delicate balance between law, politics, and the pursuit of accountability. Following the indictment, New York Attorney General Letitia James and her defense team wasted no time in addressing the public. Standing before a sea of cameras and reporters, James denounced the charges brought against her, calling them not only unfounded but also a blatant attempt to undermine her office's ongoing investigations. She asserted that the indictment was a direct response to her previous legal actions, framing the charges as a calculated move to discredit her work and intimidate those who challenge powerful interests. In a fiery statement, James accused former President Donald Trump of orchestrating the prosecution as an act of political revenge. She argued that Trump, angered by her relentless pursuit of his business dealings and legal infractions, was now using his influence to turn the legal system against her. According to James, this was not just a personal attack, but a warning to any public official who dared to hold the powerful accountable. Her lead attorney, Abby Lowell, echoed these sentiments in front of the courthouse. Lowell told reporters that the case was less about justice and more about settling political scores. He emphasized that the defense would expose what they believed to be a pattern of selective prosecution, where legal standards are applied unevenly depending on one's political connections or adversaries. Lowell insisted that the evidence would show the charges lack merit and are motivated by a desire for retribution rather than a pursuit of truth. The defense team has already begun preparing a robust challenge to the prosecution's case. They plan to scrutinize every aspect of the indictment, from the evidence presented to the motivations behind the investigation itself. Their strategy will focus on demonstrating that James is being unfairly targeted for her role as a public servant, and that the prosecution's actions threaten the independence of law enforcement officials everywhere. On the other side, prosecutor Lindsay Halligan stood firm in her resolve. Addressing the media, Halligan insisted that the charges against James were not about politics, but about the equal application of the law. She argued that no one, regardless of their position or influence, should be above accountability. Halligan maintained that the evidence would speak for itself, and that the prosecution's case was built on facts, not political vendettas. Halligan, who previously served as an attorney for Trump, added another layer of complexity to the proceedings. She claimed that James knowingly misrepresented facts and used her office for personal gain, enriching herself at the expense of the public trust. Halligan's statements suggested that the prosecution would focus on alleged abuses of power and ethical violations, painting a picture of a public official who crossed the line for personal benefit. The prosecution further argued that James's high-ranking position made her alleged actions even more egregious. They contended that public officials must be held to the highest standards, and any breach of trust should be met with serious consequences. The courtroom became a battleground, with both sides presenting their narratives to a judge and jury tasked with separating fact from political theater. As the trial unfolds, the clash between accusations of political revenge and the pursuit of impartial justice has come to define this high-stakes legal battle. The outcome will not only determine the fate of Letitia James, but could also set a precedent for how political and legal power intersect in America's justice system. The indictment of Letitia James ignited fierce reactions, splitting along partisan lines. Democrats and civil liberties groups condemned it as an abuse of power by Trump. New York Governor Kathy Hochul called it an assault on the rule of law. Conversely, Trump supporters celebrated it as overdue justice. They view James as corrupt, seeing the indictment as vindication. This polarized response highlights the deep divisions in American society. The indictment of Letitia James is seen as part of a broader pattern of political retribution. Critics argue the Justice Department, under Trump, targets his adversaries. Similar cases like James Comey's indictment suggest a systematic campaign. Investigations into other Trump critics create a climate of fear. This raises questions about the rule of law and prosecutorial independence. The Justice Department's actions appear to serve political interests, not justice. The implications for democracy and public trust are alarming. A disturbing pattern emerges in the prosecutions of Trump's critics. Public condemnation by Trump is followed by personnel changes and renewed investigations. Loyalists replace reluctant prosecutors, ensuring Trump's agenda is pursued. Charges often involve technical violations, raising concerns of selective prosecution. This creates a two-tiered justice system, with allies protected and opponents targeted. Whether deliberate or coincidental, the perception of a weaponized justice system grows. Public trust in fundamental institutions is at risk. The indictment of Letitia James poses a critical question: justice or political retribution? The case, now before Judge Jamar K. Walker, will test the integrity of the justice system. Prosecutors argue the charges are based on evidence of wrongdoing. Ignoring the crime due to political optics would create untouchable elites. Critics point to Trump's public calls for prosecution and personnel changes as evidence of political motives. The case challenges every American to weigh the evidence and motives. Can justice be blind when influenced by political agendas? The outcome will shape the future of American democracy and justice.